Are you looking to level up your webinars this year? Well, I'm Ali Schwanke and I'm the founder of SimpleStrat, and I'm actually going to show you a couple things that I really like to do when we run our webinars, and I do this for clients as well. Things that I'm going to run through with you here are syncing webinar registrations with HubSpot, why we do that, what that makes possible for you as a marketer and in your marketing tech stack, leveraging LinkedIn events and UTM tracking to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck and creating an easy registration experience over there, better engagement with your sequence outreach, and actually we're going to use an automated email to do that, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So when you do sync HubSpot with Zoom, you're going to have this integration on the backside, and webinars, you can just check this box to have them always synced. And so you can notice that this automatically gets syncs. Here's our webinar that we're doing here. And actually I've gone ahead and set that up on a registration page. This is a landing page that we built in HubSpot. And then over here is going to be our registration. This is driven by a HubSpot form as opposed to being driven by a Zoom form. And the reason for that is when we get them on our website, then we have the chance to be able to cookie those registrations. And then we actually preserve that source data. So when you don't have it integrated with Zoom, you end up with contexts that look like this, where you've got the original sources integration. So integration Zoom, integration Zoom, integration Zoom. That doesn't tell me a lot about where they came from to actually get to that registration link. But when you're actually using the form from Zoom embedded within a HubSpot form here, you've got the traffic sources where we've got the UTM tracking here. So you can see we're looking at flywheel fuel leads. That's the name of our webinar series. And you can notice that we've got a lot of different places that people are coming from. And this is really important for us, and especially me, as I'm trying to figure out our webinar promotion strategy. So to make sure that that happens, again, you're going to be on your registration page. This is going to be a HubSpot form. On the back side here, we've got this form content. We do have a form made specifically in HubSpot. It's embedded right here. And then where this comes together is actually going to be in a workflow. So in a workflow on the back side, we've actually got this workflow. We're going to look at the webinar workflow. This is what we're going to use to move people into that webinar. So they fill out this form on that specific page. After this specific criteria is met, and in this criteria, we're actually looking at the criteria of the date. And so we're putting the date after the day of the webinar. So if they happen to be here after, they go into a marketing contact and they can get this on demand. If they go before, then we're adding them to this Zoom webinar. So they actually get the Zoom webinar registration so they can join live. And this is where that webinar ID comes in handy. So we put the webinar ID here, and then they're getting both a confirmation email from us as well as a confirmation email from Zoom. Now, why do we do it that way? Because the confirmation email from us allows us to brand that accordingly. If they get it from Zoom, it allows us to have that Zoom specific participant ID information in there. And also it gives us a chance to have them, again, easily add it to their calendar with that functionality. So we're all used to that. We found that that works far better than actually trying to customize all of that through HubSpot. So the next thing I like to do is drive some more engagement. So here we've got when someone registers for this webinar. So again, this is the webinar that is specific to the one coming up here. When their source is specific to LinkedIn, so the latest source that they convert on, again, that form, if they came from LinkedIn, we're going to assume that they're active on LinkedIn. So let's go ahead and send them a LinkedIn invitation. So we're not going to send directly from the system. We're actually going to create a task for them to connect. And here you'll notice that we've got this specific LinkedIn search URL. If I click into this, you'll see that this is actually a property that we have inside of our HubSpot. It takes all of their name, puts them into a Boolean search, and then actually gives us a link to click that most likely gets us to them on LinkedIn. What this does is it just creates an opportunity for us to create a task with the URL to go connect on LinkedIn right there, which makes it a lot easier. No hunting and pecking around in LinkedIn. And then we've got an internal email notification that goes to the person who actually owns that contact. This is helpful if you happen to be in an environment where you've got a lot of contacts that are managed by a consultant, as in our case. Which one of our clients are actually registering for our upcoming webinars? Let's make sure we bring that up. Hey, I noticed that you registered for our webinar. This is going to be that notification that gets to that specific person on our team. So hooray, your client registered for the webinar. Here's their details, again, all based on tokens there. And then we've got a delay here because one thing I do want to ask them, so we've got a delay for 1 day, and then we're going to delay until 7:30 a.m. the next day on a business day, and we're going to send them a question to invite them to share what they might have gotten or what they might want to get from this webinar. So this automated email is going to say, hey, I noticed that you registered for our webinar. What would you like to get? We're working on content. Are there any key questions? Let us know. Looking forward to hearing from you. Again, this comes from me. It's an automated email, but this there, if they have a first name, gets filled in with the hi first name, so hi Ali. And then if they respond, in this particular workflow, we've actually got it set, so delay for 3 days. Let's check if they responded. If they did, let's make sure that Ali goes in and reviews their responses and or make sure that if they indicate interest, perhaps we move them to a different life cycle stage. Maybe they're sales qualified, or maybe just is something to keep in mind. So if that happens, that's here. If not, then we just go ahead and end the workflow. Now, let's go back to the actual event itself. So again, we've got a promise of what we're going to cover. Now, one of the great things about LinkedIn is it does have an event feature. So I love to use the event feature as an opportunity to get more people into a webinar because the ease at which you can invite people to a webinar on LinkedIn is pretty huge. But the barrier to them actually registering can be a challenge. So how I like to solve this is I like to go in and actually add an external event link. And this is built using the tracking URLs that are found on the backside of HubSpot. So we've got this tracking analytics in the settings, tracking URLs back here. And you'll notice that I have this LinkedIn social event specific UTM. So when I copy this, when I put this into a search bar at the top or the browser bar, you'll notice that it's pre-packed with all of these details in my UTM that will tell me then when people register that that's where they came from. So I found that this is really helpful, especially if we're trying to figure out if the event is the thing that actually drove them. So I went ahead and corrected the date and added the time zone, add a really good catchy graphic, name the events, and then we've got the description here. Whoever happens to be a speaker also gets added to this, as well as a chance for them to invite their whole network. And again, when someone clicks, yes, I want to come to this event, to actually get into the event, then they have to go through this registration right here, which then captures that UTM parameters, gets them in our HubSpot, and does all the things that I just showed you in that workflow. So let's go ahead and click next on this one. We're going to push it live. Okay, so now that that is posted, we're actually going to let this go and we're going to bring back the event itself. So not now. Let's go to the event. We're going to go back to home and to get there. This is a little bit of a workaround. You're going to go to events, and then in the events, you should be able to see evidently ours. There we go. I'm going to go and share this, and I'm going to invite attendees. So now that we've got this, it's going to show me all the people that I'm connected to and who I might want to invite to this webinar. So I can simply go through here and actually, invite people. That's how that works. So that's pretty straightforward. But what if I only want to invite the people that I really think might be interested in this versus, my entire LinkedIn network, which is probably more effective, right? If you go into LinkedIn and you go back to the connections, you can actually select who is your first degree connection. Again, this is in LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I'm going to look for first degree connections, and then I'm going to look for their current job title is Marketing Director. Okay, so now I've got people who are in charge of marketing. Let's say I don't want to have anybody who is my competitors. Okay, so we're going to exclude those two. And so we have marketing directors, everybody who happens to be a current first connection of mine, and those are the people that I might choose to invite to the webinar. So what I might do is open this on one screen. Again, this is kind of hokey because there's not an easy way to do this, at least without a bunch of external tools. So if you keep this open on one screen and then simply head to this screen and type in the people that you're looking for, then you can find them a lot easier. So that is one hack that I really like to use, because when people get invited on LinkedIn, it's as easy as going to the notifications, clicking accept, and then at the time of the LinkedIn webinar, they actually get a notification that says, hey, it's live, and then they have to actually go through that registration link if they wanted to get into the content. So that's another hack that I like to use that promotes additional engagement. Now, if you happen to be a HubSpot user, a couple of other things to note is Zoom will automatically create a marketing event based on using a Zoom webinar. So here we've got this, should you move your website to HubSpot? We've got 16 registrations, and then once the event is held, we'll have cancellations and we'll have how many people actually attended. So that's going to be really powerful for us to get some numbers and gauge how effective that was. Now, the last piece I'd like to use is if we happen to want to send a campaign to someone who attended the webinar and someone who did not. Now, when you're over in Zoom, you can actually choose to have it sent to people who, let's go back to this, email settings. You can have emails sent directly from Zoom to attendees who came and those who didn't, but I like to do this in HubSpot because then again, it gets me custom visibility into their interaction with the content, which I lose if I do that here in Zoom. So the last piece I want to touch on is going to be that engagement piece. So you'll see that we had a webinar here and we've got the webinar registrations were 226 and those that attended were 83. So that might seem like, oh my gosh, there's not that many there, but quite honestly, in a B2B environment, anything that's north of 30% is usually pretty standard. So we can also add in Zoom attendance event properties, which means that we can actually filter or choose to segment this list further by how long they actually attended the event. So in this case, I could say, I wanted to say anybody who has attended, greater than, let's say, 51% of the webinar, and then save changes. And then I'd use this list in my automations to send a very different follow-up message than the people that actually did not attend the webinar. So those are just a couple of easy things I like to do across platforms within automation and segmentation that allow us to level up our webinars and get more return on the efforts that we put into these events. We'll see you next time.